So thank you all for coming to the timeline to application, and we're going to go over what to expect for the next couple of years as you're preparing to apply. So I chose a marathon theme, a Boston Marathon theme for this presentation. Does it show the regular screen now? Can you guys see the screen? If you can type a message, does it show a screen? Okay, it popped up now. Excellent. So we're going to walk through the next few months in terms of what you'll need for a committee letter, and then also in terms of what you should be expecting from the application cycle and times that'll be busy, times you'll be hearing from schools, etc. So this is kind of the start of your marathon, October, November, as we sort of kick off. So this is the time where you want to be thinking about doing some self-assessment. We're going to have our foundation meetings next month in November, and I'll be putting those up in the calendar within the next week. For folks who haven't taken the MCAT yet, who are planning to take the MCAT, the registration began this morning. So if you haven't registered and you're planning to take the MCAT in January, April, or May, you should plan to register today. I've heard that some of the spots are filling up already. You're also welcome to set up an individual appointment with me, and if you're not on campus, I do Skype appointments as well, and I'm happy to meet with you by Skype. So you really want to do some thoughtful reflection and make sure that this is the best year for you to apply. It's an arduous and expensive process, so you want to be making sure that you're applying at the time that you're going to be the best candidate that you can be and most able to be accepted. December, we like to get people really started on the application process. And, if you have a little downtime, if you're in classes or if you're working and you have some vacation time, it's a good time to use to really get your application prepped. I know it seems really early, but you'll be really glad later on that you spent this time. So you want to, number one, the applicant agreement, which you'll find on MAP. You can download that and really look things over, put things into your calendar. Put all of the dates in your calendar so you know when things will be due. You may want to start filling out everything in the medical applicant portfolio, because we do require that you have that submitted before you can request your committee letter. The self-assessment has to be turned in on January 31st, and it does take a while to do that. It's 17 pages, so you don't want to wait until January 30th to start that. And starting your personal statement in this year, November, December, is a really good idea. It does take a while to put together a really good self-assessment. And it's really important that you spend the time. That's your one opportunity to really talk directly to the admissions committee. So you want to make sure to really be thinking about what do you want to say to them. And it takes a little while to do that. And you want to work on a draft, put it aside for a while, and come back to it. And then also you want to start thinking about, okay, what schools am I going to be applying for? Obviously, you won't have a full list until you have your MCAT score. So if you haven't taken your test yet, you're not going to know completely, but you should have a little fun with it now. Look at the schools, think about, where do I want to go? What schools have a mission that's a really good fit with who I am? And the other thing, that I like to remind people, I know Dr. Begley mentioned this, is that, in terms of getting a really good committee letter, people ask us, well, what can I do to really be sure I'm getting a good committee letter? Spend some time on your medical applicant portfolio. Spend some time on that self-assessment, because we really look at those strongly when we're putting together your committee letter. So we don't write fiction, we write about what you've done. And in order for us to know what you've done, you have to tell us about it. So the more you tell us, the better we can, do in representing you in your committee letter. So there are two January deadlines that are very important. They're both on January 31st. The applicant agreement is due and the self-assessment is due. You'll download those from MAP. Well, you'll click on a link in MAP, download them from Google Documents, fill them out, and then upload them to MAP. Remember, this is a new system. I don't anticipate any bugs, but if you are concerned or you have problems, definitely do feel free to contact me about it. So here we are, mile one of our marathon, um, through January. January, we really want to be doing ongoing preparation. You're working on your personal statement. You're welcome to use the Writing Center, even if you're an alumni. They're really good with giving you feedback on the grammar, making sure you're using an active voice in your personal statement. January is a good time to be asking for your letters of recommendation, especially the external letters you want dated in the year you're applying. We do include a PDF copy of those letters in your committee letter, so you don't want to ask for those too early. Some of you may be taking your entrance exam. Don't take it too early. If you're not prepared, if you're not ready, if you're not getting a good score, remember you only want to take that once. If you wind up taking it more than once, it's not the end of the world. But definitely, the goal is to just take it once. February, we actually start doing committee letter interviews if all your stuff is in. If all your letters are here, our map is filled out completely, you have your personal statement done. So this is a list of all of the things that you need to have complete in order to qualify for a committee letter interview. You need to have met all the deadlines thus far, and you need to have all of these things in. Now, I will send you a copy of this presentation or a link to this presentation, so you don't need to write all of this down. It's a fair amount of stuff. If you can finish all of this and request the committee letter interview earlier, it's nice if you can have that earlier committee letter interview. Dr. Begley and I start, in February and March when we have one or two people in a day. By the time we get to the end of the committee letter interview cycle, we're talking to 4 or 5 people in a day. So it's just for your sake, you're more memorable if you're the only person that we talk to in one day. So we always encourage you to be earlier. Earlier is always better in this process. March 15th is the deadline for all of the faculty letters. All 3 faculty letters are due. It's a deadline for the clinical letter as well. Those have to be on file, so they have to be submitted on March 15th. You'll see in MAP, they'll all be requested through MAP, and you'll see that you'll see when they come in, so you'll be able to see when they've arrived through the medical applicant portfolio. All letters aren't complete until they're verified, so I read all of the letters just to confirm that there wasn't a mistake made in one of them, that your writer didn't call you he when you're actually she, or they didn't forget to sign the letter if it's an external letter writer. The verification can happen after March 15th, but the letter itself needs to be in on March 15th. We'll have another workshop in January and talk about this process a little bit more. You can also read about it on the website, or if you have individual questions, you're welcome to talk to me. So yay, letters are definitely a stressful part of the application process. So you will, a lot of people do find that to be a harder part of the application process. So you'll be really happy when it's done. Once the letters are in and you filled out MAP, you can, you can request your committee letter at that time. The deadline to request your committee letter interview is April 15th. So all of those requirements, MAP has to be filled out and your committee letter interview needs to be requested by April 15th. In April, you may be sitting for your entrance exam, your MCAT. There is an MCAT date in a couple of them in April. We do continue with committee letter interviews in April. We have a lot of them in April. You want to be finishing that personal statement in April. You want to have several people read it. If you're, you have a physician who's been a mentor for you, definitely have them read it. You'll probably get a lot of conflicting advice, but you're just going to continue to, kind of piece the advice together and put together the best product. And you'll go through several drafts of that personal statement. The last day to have a committee letter interview is May 15th. So, by May 15th, you'll have completed the committee letter interview. Everything will be set. In terms of the committee letter, we don't actually write your committee letters until after you've applied. So when you apply, you'll download a copy of your application and you'll upload that to MAP. And then that's when we write the committee letter. The committee letter is a part of the secondary application. So it's fine that it's not in on January 2nd or 3rd. We're pretty on top of things, getting them in within a couple of weeks of people applying. May applications come available, and you really want to set aside a couple days to input all of the information into the application. It will take a certain amount of time because you have to put in all your grades, you have to put in descriptions. You really want to put everything in, set it aside and go back to it, because once you submit it, you can't make changes. And if you have a typo or a grammatical error in there, you want to make sure that you catch that. So you want to make sure you have people available to proofread that for you also. Last year, applications for DO programs opened up on May 5th, and they actually let you submit them on May 5th. And the applications went to the medical schools, the DO schools, on June 15th. Students really were waiting, taking a week or 10 days to fill out their application because they promised a 4-day or a 4-week verification cycle. So there wasn't really an advantage to submitting on May 5th. And that's something we'll talk about as we get closer. I'm not sure what their timeline is going to be, if it's going to be the same next year. I'm assuming it is, but we don't know because the May was a little bit of a surprise last year. The MD programs traditionally have made their applications available around June 2nd. They typically send their applications, or their first release to the medical schools is typically the fourth Thursday in June, which this year would be June 23rd. I don't know if that's what it's going to be or if it'll be different. That's what it's traditionally been, so that's what I assume it'll be. It could change. So that first release date is the first day that any of the schools actually see your application. So you want to submit your application early so that the schools get it early, so that then you can also get your secondaries early. All right, June, July, here we are. We're in Wellesley Scream Tunnel. This is about halfway through the application process. So June or July, you're submitting. Allopathic, osteopathic, dental, veterinary submit in June. The dental applications don't actually become available until the beginning of June. You have to type fewer words into that application. It is a little bit shorter. You do want to set aside some time in those first days of June, though, if you're applying to dental school, because you really want to fill it out and have a pretty quick turnaround on filling it out, proofreading it, and then submitting it. Once your application has been verified, you want to confirm, make sure that if they made any changes, they didn't make a mistake. They're usually pretty good, but they are people, so upon occasion they can make an error. July 31st is the deadline to submit an application and receive a committee letter except podiatry, which is August 31st. That's because their applications don't open until August. So the end of June and beginning of July is when the MD and DO programs will be sending you your secondary applications, and you can really expect a big rush of those right when those applications are received by the schools. If you've submitted, a little bit further on in the cycle and your application isn't verified, schools will still be able to see that you've applied, and they can still send you secondary applications based on your application. So even if you're taking the May 14th MCAT and you don't get the score till June 15th, you may submit a little bit later and your application may not be verified, but you may still be getting those secondaries towards the end of June. So you really want to be actively checking your junk email because a lot of them do get filtered to junk email. You also want to make sure to set aside time and money in order to be able to send those right back because the application isn't complete without secondaries. They take a lot of time to fill out, and unfortunately, they are really expensive. So you really want to make sure that you have the funds set aside to pay for them, and you really want to think about how many you want to pay for when you're applying. And also, you really want to set aside proper time for essays. Once you've submitted your application, you can start pre-writing some of those essays. So some of the schools will ask similar questions from year to year. How are you unique? Why do you want to go to this school? Why do you want to be a physician? So you can start writing essays like that while you're waiting to get the secondaries. Now, all of the dental schools have their own process. So you'll have to do a little research. Some of them send secondaries with essays, some of them send secondaries without essays. Some of them actually have you fill out a secondary on the interview day. So it can really vary with the dental school, and you want to look at your individual schools to see. So here we are on Heartbreak Hill. We filled out all of our applications, and this is the part that can be another part that can be difficult because now it's the time where you're waiting. So the admissions committees start meeting usually in around July, and that's when they start sending out invitations for interviews. So August is typically when the first interview invitations start coming out. Make sure if you receive an interview invitation, you respond promptly and with enthusiasm. Try and schedule your interviews so that they're a little bit spread out. Don't have like 2 days in between them, maybe a week in between them is okay. You know how you do with interviews, but you want to have a little bit of time because they're pretty intense. So make sure to think about the scheduling. Sometimes they'll offer you, they'll contact you in September and they won't offer you a date until January. Still schedule that right away. If you requires a flight, book your flight. So really respond with enthusiasm to them. Interviews typically start in September. First acceptances for osteopathic schools are in September. A lot of the osteopathic schools will give you an option if you want to hear back right away or if you want to wait to hear back. So you can do a little strategic planning with that. Some people want to hear back right away because, if you get accepted, that's great. The osteopathic schools do have a rather large deposit. So if a school is not a top school you interview at, you may want to wait a little bit to get an answer because, if you're accepted, usually you have 2 weeks to deposit, and you may not want to put down $2,000 a deposit for a non-top choice school. It really depends, but that's something we'll talk about also a little bit later at the foundation meetings. For MD programs, they usually give you 2 weeks to deposit. Those deposits for MD programs are usually refundable, so you can be deposited at more than one school. The first day the MD programs send out acceptances is October 15th. So before October 15th, you're not going to hear an accept from them, even if you have an interview before then. Some schools don't send out acceptances on October 15th. Some of them do. They'll usually tell you if they do or if they don't at interviews. Obviously, if you don't have an interview before October 15th, you can't get accepted then. So that's one reason that applying early is an advantage because you want to be in that first accept pool. Interviews continue, offers and acceptances continue in November. They continue in December. December 1st is the first day that dental schools send out acceptances, and they do send out a lot of acceptances on December 1st. They send out acceptances after December 1st as well. So if you don't hear from anybody on December 1st, it doesn't mean that you won't in the future. So finally, we're getting to the sicko sign here. We're up to January, February. They will continue sending out invitations for interviews in January and February, and they continue interviewing during that time. Even in March, they're sending out the occasional interview invitation. They start sending out acceptances and wait lists in March and April. So some of the schools will be sending out acceptances and wait lists all along. Some of the schools send it out en masse in March. So you may not hear from some of your schools at all until March. So you may have a long time to wait for some of the schools. For MD applicants, they allow you to be deposited at more than one school until April 30th. On April 30th, you have to choose one school and you have to let the other schools know, okay, this is the, thank you, but I've decided to attend a different school. For dental applicants, May 5th is the one day that you have to let people know, okay, this is the day. And then, so May 1st for MD programs, May 6th for dental programs, the schools start going to their wait lists. So at that time, the schools will have a second round of acceptances that they send out. So, if somebody was accepted at 5 schools on, April 30th, they're telling 4 schools, no, thank you, I'm not coming. Now 4 schools are going to accept people off of their wait list. So there's a whole domino effect of acceptances that come in May. And those go through May and June, and sometimes even into July, although that's more rare. So a lot of people do get in off those wait lists. Whew. And here we are, June, July. That's when you start planning your move. That's when you're pretty sure, okay, this is definitely when you're going to be, this is where I'm going to be going. This is when I'm going to be studying. This is where I'll be. So you can start, setting up where you're going to be living, planning the details of your finances, getting ready for your move and your orientation, and get ready for school. So that's kind of the overview of the application timeline. It is a really long timeline, unfortunately. You really have to pace yourself, and you have to understand you may hear, if you're a DO applicant, you may hear in September. If you're an MD applicant, it may be October. If you're a dental applicant, it may be December. For some people, though, you may not know until, June if you're going to be accepted or not accepted. And, they're not accepting anybody who they don't think is fabulous. So they can think that you're terrific, but you still may not get in until, really late in the cycle. So it is kind of important that you kind of set those expectations and you really understand this is kind of going to be a long haul in terms of the application cycle. So you have to kind of set those expectations and really, understand how long the process is going to take. I'm not sure if anybody has questions about anything, about any of this process, about any of the stuff that I reviewed. Oh, here's a question. Do you have an estimate of the average amount of schools that people apply to? So national average number of schools that people apply to for MD programs is about 15. And with that, if you're applying to, say, Harvard, for example, it's, no matter how wonderful you are, Harvard is kind of a, it's not a guarantee for anyone. So maybe that's number 16. So if you have a couple schools that you're like, oh, these schools, I just really want to apply there just to see. Those could be number 16, number 17, number 18. You don't want to apply to too many schools because of all those secondaries you'll be getting in the MD programs. They really come in bulk. And there's a lot of essay writing, so you don't want to be writing too many essays all at once because you're not going to do a good job of it. DO programs, national average is lower. It's around 12 or so. And that's just because, there are fewer DO programs and the culture is a little bit different. And then with dental programs, it's also around a dozen or so. Dental programs, a lot of them have different prerequisite requirements. So to meet all of the requirements of all the schools, it's going to be less likely. So some of the schools want microbiology, some want immunology. So in order to put together a good package for a group of schools, you're not going to cover 20 schools and the requirements of 20 schools. It's not a good idea to apply to 30 schools. Just because with those secondaries, you're not going to do as good a job with them. You're not going to get them back fast enough. And that means that, until your secondary is in, your application isn't complete. And that means you're going to be reviewed later for admission. Other questions? Anyone? One thing I will say about the school choice is that people who have the most success at getting accepted to medical school tend to apply to schools where they really are a good fit with the mission of the school. And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit at the foundation meeting. So, you definitely want to be thinking about who you are and who is this school and what are they all about when you're applying.